Welcome to the European Resilience Initiative Centre video podcast. Today our guest is Daria Kaleniuk. She's an executive director of the Anticorruption Action Centre, ANTEC, and she's a co-founder of the International Centre for Ukrainian Victory. Welcome, Daria.
Hello, good to be here.
We have seen in the year 2022, 2 years ago, after the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, a chain of Ukrainian victories and liberation of huge territories of Ukraine from the Russian occupation. Then in 2023, the Ukrainian offensive stuck to some kind, and now we are facing the third year of the war, and we don't know what comes next. But can you tell us what stays in front of the Ukrainian victory?
Well, first of all, I want to say that there is no stalemate. There was no stalemate in Ukraine in 2023, and while 2022 was successful with land operations and we liberated 50% of what Russia occupied since February 2024, in 2023 we have successfully got control over the Black Sea, and we managed to ensure the trade for our vessels with grains through the Black Sea without the support of international partners and without the so-called will of Russian Federation. Our long-range drones and other interesting tools which we are using in protecting our Black Sea really forced Russian Navy vessels to move far away from our shore and limited their ability to destroy our grain infrastructure. So, and coming back to 2024, what's ahead of us? We have to look into the two important articles from now former head of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Zelenskyy. However, some people with whom he worked are remaining in the command of the General Staff. It means that opinions of General Zelenskyy are really important and relevant and most likely will be implemented. And he's speaking about the next stage of war, which is focused on technology and cheap robotic solutions. We are talking about drones, different kinds of drones, cheap, small drones, which help our soldiers to do air reconnaissance, cheap, small drones which actually help to do attacks on Russian armored vehicles, and much more significant long-range drones which help us to kill supply chain for Russian military. We are also expecting 2024 finally arrival of F-16s to Ukraine. So it means that if 2022 we were focusing on land and we had some victories there, 2023 we've got victories in the Black Sea, taken under our control the grain route without actually having any navy. In 2024, we have huge hopes for the air through drones and through arrival of fourth-generation fighter jets to Ukraine.
So these are practically the steps, the roadmap for the Ukrainian victory, like victory on the sea, on the land, and in the air. Can we say that Ukraine has some sort of a roadmap plan with a timeline when Ukraine will liberate the southern regions of Ukraine, when Ukrainian army will enter Crimea and Donbass? Can we have such plans under such volatile circumstances like now?
Ukrainian victory is obviously more than just military plans, and Ukrainian victory after the second year of the large-scale invasion means important redesign of thinking about military logistics and finances. We have to think about war economy, and not only we in Ukraine have to think about war economy, our partners and allies have to think about war economy. And the reason I'm talking about that is that Russia is learning a lot. And Russia is adjusting to the situation on the battlefield and to the geopolitical situation. When we analyze Russian budget for 2024, we've seen dramatic increase of the direct spendings on military and defense. It is 29% of all the spendings for 2024. It's just direct spendings, and we understand there's a lot of indirect expenses on various state-owned defense corporations. And in total, we estimate that it will be about 6% of Russian GDP spent for direct military needs. If to compare with our NATO allies, 2% is still a goal for many NATO countries. In Ukraine, obviously, we do spend much more. We spend half of our budget for security and defense, but we have to understand that our economy is destroyed, and we can't resist on. We can't rely just on our own resources, neither financial nor industrial base resources. Again, in order to plan victory, we have to plan with finances and with logistics. And, while we can find money, and we can talk about that, we will come back to the Russian $300 billion, which can be confiscated now in order to help Ukraine win. While we also can deal with fixing the supply chain for the defense industry and producing more weapons and more cheap weapons like drones. However, there is one resource which we can't ramp up very quickly, and these resources are people, soldiers. Obviously, for 2 years of war, we lost a lot of our best of the past military officers and soldiers. Many are wounded and would require some time to return back. People who don't have skills and who don't have experience in fighting, they need some time to train. And in Ukraine, we are reluctant to use our soldiers as mid-rangers. This is what Russia is doing. Russia doesn't care how many people will die. And they just have math and time on their side. The math says that they have at least 3-4 times more population, so their mobilization potential is much higher. Also, time is saying that they need more the stalemate, the kind of the long war, the protracted war, where Ukraine is not clearly winning, is providing time for Russia to train their troops, to build more weapons, to make some solution based on the lessons learned from the battlefield in Ukraine, and using their war economy prepare for the much more successful counterattack. So the point is that to achieve victory, we have to have also political goals, but it's not only just up to Ukraine. We need the political commitment from our partners, particularly from NATO member states, to help Ukraine win. And it's already 2 years, almost 2 years past since the large-scale invasion. And still, in majority of our partners who are NATO members, there is no clear decision that we are with Ukraine until the victory, that the political goal of this war is to make sure Ukraine wins. Otherwise, there will be war in NATO. There is no such a conclusion in most of the NATO member states. There is definitely no such a conclusion in the US, where we see a huge political problem, where the Congress cannot vote for the supplemental for Ukraine for already 6 months. And Europe doesn't have a plan B. No one in Europe expected America to stop sending weapons to Ukraine, but it is happening right now. And we are now in February 2024, where we have historic historically low number of military assistance coming from the US to Ukraine since the large-scale invasion. And for our troops, it's a huge challenge, as without having ammunition, we are not able properly do counterattacks, but we are also not able to properly defend all the territories which we already liberated. And instead of using arms, we are using our human bodies as shield to defend these territories. And the question is, what will NATO be doing? What's the plan? What's the strategy when our human shield, our soldiers will finish?
That is exactly a dramatic development which we observe now along the front line in Ukraine. And I've personally been recently close to Avdiivka and talked to the soldiers of the 47th Brigade as we delivered drones for them, as we do since almost a year. And the situation is indeed severe. We will definitely talk more about this commitment by the West, or lack of commitment by the West. But before we do this, don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. If you have your ideas, leave your comments under this video. We are talking to Daria Kaleniuk, who is an executive director of the Anticorruption Action Centre, ANTAC, and the co-founder of the International Center for Ukrainian Victory in Kyiv. And Daria, you have already mentioned this lack of commitment by the West, and we have seen that this week Germany has finally founded the new factory for the production of ammunition for Rheinmetall company, but it is just start of the construction of the factory, which will be finished in several months in the best case scenario, and only then it will start to produce ammunition. So we are still far away from the full-scale production of ammunition 2 years after the start of the Russia's invasion. But this lack of the commitment in the West, can it be explained some sort of the lack of understanding in the West, or also like lack of communication or Russia's influence? What is inside of this position of the West, or is it just blind trust in the eternal support by the US, which we do not see now?
I think there are a few answers to the question. The first one is that United Europe got used to outsource its security to the US. And after the large-scale invasion to Ukraine, many European nations understood that they are not prepared to defend themselves if there is no backup from the US. Many countries started to learn this lesson and adapt very fast, and these are primarily countries in Baltics and Eastern Europe, like Poland, also some countries, some Nordic countries, like Sweden, Finland. But some countries in the Central and Western Europe, they still don't realize that it's actually realistic scenario to have attack on NATO. And it's actually realistic scenario that Article 5 might have to be invoked. And it's actually a realistic scenario that the boys and girls from Spain, from France, from Italy might end up serving in the army and fighting Russians. Unfortunately, there is no this thinking yet among majority of political leadership and population in these countries. And this causes that there is lack of sense of urgency. And that's the reason why we are going so slow in ramping up production, defense production across Europe. To Rheinmetall, 2 years to have additional factory for 155 caliber production is some sort of success. But we don't know what will happen in Ukraine in 2 years. We don't know how many soldiers will be left in Ukraine in 2 years. What's the plan to do now? Where are the investments into the drones, in technologies? In Ukraine, we have a lot of innovators. In Ukraine, we have a lot of interesting technology solutions which are being tested immediately in the battlefield. And some our electronic warfare and some our drone solutions are much cheaper and significantly better than very expensive solutions in NATO, in the West, and in Europe. It's important to understand for our allies that war in Ukraine will impact directly the future of United Europe and security of United Europe. Obviously, the US developments is a huge disappointment, but honestly, that was predictable. US is far away. This war is not in America. However, it is in Europe. And while Americans can afford themselves to use war in Ukraine as a political ball in fight between different political parties, in Europe it's much harder. So I hope that this situation in Congress, where during the presidential elections campaign, there are no votes to support crucially important bill for Europe, not only for Ukraine, but to Europe. I hope that this lesson will be now very carefully learned by European leaders, and there will be increased sense of urgency. Guys, what if America will say, no, we don't commit to our allies in NATO? No, attack on Estonia doesn't mean that we have to send our troops to protect Europe. These are important questions to address now, so to avoid being too late.
Indeed, that is the situation which is important. What do we have with the commitment in the West and how the situation will develop further? But if we come back to the situation in Ukraine, we see also some developments which can cause a sort of distraction or confusion in the West. Recently, President Zelenskyi has replaced the commander-in-chief of Ukrainian army, General Zelenskyy, and replaced him by another General Syrsky, who was a hero of defending of Kiev. But Valery Zelenskyy was a general who was not respected in the army and in the society and well known in the West. What does it mean? It is a normal decision of the president to replace one general by another, but on another side, can it cause like some sort of confusion and raise question, is Ukraine sure what Ukraine is doing on the field, why this replacement is needed?
It is definitely the priority of the president to make such decisions. He is the commander-in-chief of the whole Ukraine, and he decides which generals to appoint, which not. From the perspective of Ukrainian society, we lacked clear understanding why General Zelenskyy was displaced. We understand that there was quite high support, and still is quite high support, both among civilians and military of General Zelenskyy. He has a reputation of being quite modern, reform-oriented person, which is thinking outside of the box, while General Syrsky has a reputation of being more kind of Soviet-style general. But we have to remember that Syrsky was in the team of General Zelenskyy. So he was a commander of the land forces of Ukraine and had successfully managed operations with liberation of Kyiv, as you mentioned, and also liberation of Kharkiv. So there will be a lot of demand now for Syrsky team. I think that this reshuffle opened up more public conversations about what has to be changed in the armed forces of Ukraine, because as it is said, one small Soviet army can't win another bigger Soviet army, which is Russian army, right? So we have to be better in quality, not in quantity. The task for General Syrskyi is to continue some important reforms and changes which were started under General Zaluzhny, like making important digitalization in the army, using innovation systems, using robots, drones, and various techniques which are replacing human beings. Because as I've explained, the most irreplenishable resource in our army are our soldiers. And among Ukrainian military, General Syrskyi is not very famous for caring about people, but I think that he hears this demand, and that he will have to show some initiatives and some solutions, some decisions which prevent super risky operations for Ukrainian armed forces. That's I think would be an important challenge. So let us see. We still observe the completion of the reshuffle. It's not just Syrskyi who was replaced, the head of the general staff was replaced, we have the new commander of the land forces. There is a very good general with a great reputation, Mr. General Sukharevsky, who has respect among the army for using drones and technology, so we have hope that this track will remain. And also this reshuffle in the armed forces impacted some reshuffle in the Ministry of Defense. First Deputy Minister is now the commander of the land forces of Ukraine, and it means that some policy regulations in the MOD will probably also be changed.
But you have already mentioned the feeling how the Ukrainian society reacted to this reshuffling, and as you mentioned, there had been like some criticism against this decision, and one can say that this criticism was caused mostly by a skeptical approach. Like 2 years after the start of the full-scale invasion by Russia, there is some anxiety in the Ukrainian society, and as people are not satisfied with the lack of success on the battlefield, the other reasons like calls to fight corruption, questions of mobilization, how it will look like, what is about pulling back soldiers who have served for months and replace them with the new ones, what is about the other fronts like economy, etc. This cause some sort of pressure inside of Ukraine 2 years after the start of the full-scale invasion and lead to some sort of unnecessary internal conflict which could undermine Ukraine's stability and will to fight?
Well, there is pending law on mobilization in the parliament of Ukraine, and clearly the goal for the military chiefs in Ukraine is to have more soldiers. But in order for society to produce more soldiers, there has to be frank and honest conversation between the leadership of the country with society. And that frank and honest conversation has to avoid producing some solutions or results which are obviously unachievable in a quick perspective. And for 2 years we lacked that conversation. So authorities, well, President Zelenskyi and authorities decided to communicate with the population in a very positive mode, and we can understand the reason for picking up this mode. The leadership of the country was saying that we will be soon in Crimea, that the war will end in 2 months, that we will liberate everything very quickly. But now it is obviously that it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen very quickly. That this war, until Russia exists, will be a constant either reality or a constant threat. It will lack honest conversation with society, that everyone has to be prepared for a long run, and everyone has to find him or herself a role, how to contribute to winning the war, but understanding that it will not be easy, quick fix. So. You know, very often I remember the history speech of Winston Churchill. He had this honest conversation with his people, right? He was saying that I had nothing to suggest to you rather than blood, tears, hard work, because it's existential war with the fascism. And now we have existential war with the Russians, a new way of fascism. So it is important to have honest conversation. I think Ukrainian society and Ukrainian people are ready for this honest conversation. But as there were over expectations in society for 2 years, now the mood is going down. Because, yeah, we are not in Crimea. Congress has not voted for the support for Ukraine. We are losing our soldiers, more people have to mobilize, so these are complicated questions, and internal pressure inside Ukraine is going up, because without having answers to these questions from the key leadership, it is hard to keep this trust between society and leadership of the country. So therefore, I do hope that President Zelenskyi will reconsider his communication strategy with the people of Ukraine, and this will be not just one-way communication, but it will be two-way communication.
So you mean this like providing a lot of interviews to the foreign media, but not appearing mostly in interviews in media in Ukraine, but just providing the statements, or how does it look like from the perspective within the Ukrainian society?
Well, President Zelenskyi has very narrow inner circle of people who are making up crucial, important for the people of Ukraine decisions. And according to his interview, this inner circle is limited to 5 people. And when society is facing such an existential threat for already 30 years, it is impossible to manage our defense and governance successfully relying just on 5 people from the inner circle. So I think that President Zelenskyy has to be more open to conversation with people who criticize them, because those who have criticism are also patriots of Ukraine, and they can have the not very pleasant point of view for the president, but pointing out on mistakes of the leadership of the country can help to make us stronger. But we see how president is kind of isolating himself and his inner circle from facing up directly criticism from society, and that limits the ability to manage the country in a better way. But we can't avoid that, because just in order to win Russia, we must be much more advanced than Russia in terms of how we manage our country.
This was, of course, what President Zelenskyy had to do in the first months of the full-scale invasion. like limiting access by the people out of security reasons, and concentrating on just one-way communication to the people. We all remember how inspiring was his position during the first days of the war, when he said he stays in Kiev, and his call to the US, give me arms, don't give me right, give me arms. And that is understandable. Maybe indeed, like after 2 years of the war, this style should be changed, but that is understandable where this style comes from, probably. But I think it is very important what you mentioned, that the criticism within the society is also being expressed by Ukrainian patriots. Um, are there like any platforms which provide this space for political and other discussion? And is it possible to have these platforms during the war, where you cannot have all the ways of peaceful society being functioning as during the peacetime? You cannot just have a vote or referendum on what kind of military operation should be provided. You cannot also be fully open towards the media about your war plans. That is obvious.
Well, Ukraine is a unique country in that matter, because despite the martial law and the largest since World War II conventional warfare, we have free media in Ukraine, and we have investigative journalists, civil society actors who are able to freely expose corruption, wrongdoings, even in the security and defense sector. And after that exposure, President must react. So, and that was the reason of some of the earlier reshuffles in the Ministry of Defense. After the exposures of procurements for inflated prices, policies changed significantly there. There were set up 2 agencies to procure both non-lethal stuff and weapons for the armed forces for Ukraine. Non-lethal agency is performing extremely well. We see that in the first 2 months of its operation, they managed to save $66 million just on the procurement of clothes and fuel for the army. So that was possible because society, journalists, civil society actors were able to freely expose some wrongdoings in the MOD and demand from President Zelenskyi to bring up changes. And that caused the dismissal of previous Minister Reznikov and appointment of the new minister, who brought a team with which focused on reforms of the security and defense procurements. And that is one of the most important pillars in our security and defense reforms leading to NATO integration. And it's not limited just to this reform. The digitalization in the armed forces is on the way. We can't be like in Russia, which is paper army. We can't win them just being paper army. We have to be innovating digital army, which is being transformed quite fast. Obviously, because of the martial law, some democratic movements are limited, and this is because of the security risks. So people can't gather in the streets for rallies, for example, and elections can't be held now because clearly Russia will use it to destroy Ukraine from inside. But Ukraine still functions as a quite vibrant democracy where people can hold government accountable and can demand some changes. President can just avoid and ignore these demands.
Indeed, Ukraine is a unique society where we have full-scale war and at the same time have a vivid civil society, a free media, political life, functioning parliament, accountability, of the powers to the people, and a huge volunteer society, which to some sort of extent supports and supplements even the army supply, and that is exactly what very few societies in Europe could have in a case of such war. Maybe Finland, maybe some other countries which were preparing themselves for decades for such a confrontation, but clearly not the societies like Germany or France, which still obviously have no idea what a modern war can mean for them. It was Daria Kaleniuk, who is an executive director of the Anticorruption Action Centre, ANTAC, and the co-founder of the International Centre for Ukrainian Victory. We have talked about all the challenges with the international support, the internal political discussion in Ukraine, reshuffling in the army leadership, and the tasks for the year 2024, 2 years after the start of the full-scale invasion of Russia. Don't forget to like, to share, to subscribe to this channel. Leave your comments under this video. Thank you, Daria, for having joined us today.